The Jeju Island resort rose like a silent cathedral against the winter sea. Snow dusted the pine trees. Waves crashed against ancient volcanic rock far below. And Zara Okafor stood frozen in the marble lobby, watching her husband emerge from a private elevator. In his tattooed hand, white lilies. The same flowers. The same date. The same devastating silence that had haunted their marriage for 7 years. Kang Ji-won walked with the quiet authority of a man who owned everything and apologized for nothing. His black coat swept behind him. The dragon scales tattooed along his neck disappeared beneath his collar. He never looked back. He never explained. For 7 years Zara had let him go. But tonight, he followed. And what she discovered behind the door of room 147 shattered everything she thought she knew about love, betrayal, and the man she had never stopped loving. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones protecting us from truths we're not ready to face. But eventually, every secret finds the light. Backhand index pointing right. Please like, share and subscribe. The first time Zara noticed the pattern, she dismissed it as coincidence. November 14th. Their second wedding anniversary. Ji-won had kissed her forehead that morning, his tattooed fingers brushing her cheek with rare tenderness. Business in Jeju, he said quietly. I'll return tomorrow. She believed him. Wives believe their husbands. Especially when those husbands are Kang Ji-won, chairman of the Kang Corporation, a man whose empire stretched across shipping, technology and industries whispered about only in shadows. By their third anniversary she noticed. By their fourth she questioned. By their fifth she stopped asking. Because asking meant answers. And answers meant truths she wasn't sure she could survive. Now, standing in the lobby of the Azure Cliff Resort, Zara felt the weight of 7 years pressing against her chest like a funeral stone. She had told herself she wouldn't come. She had booked her own flight anyway. She had told herself she didn't care anymore. But here she was, following the ghost of her marriage down a corridor lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the black winter sea. Ji-won walked ahead, unaware of her presence. His shoulders were rigid beneath his tailored coat. The white lilies clutched in his tattooed hand seemed almost fragile against his powerful frame. The full-back dragon she knew lived beneath his shirt, surrounded by peonies and crashing waves, seemed to pulse with every step he took. He reached the end of the corridor. Room 147. Zara pressed herself against a marble pillar, heart slamming against her ribs. She watched him pause. His head bowed. For a moment, just a moment, the most dangerous man in Seoul looked almost broken. Then he opened the door and disappeared inside. The corridor fell silent. Zara's breath came in shallow gasps. 7 years. 7 November 14 teaches. And behind that door lay the answer to every question she had been too afraid to ask. Who is she? The thought cut through her like a blade. Who has he been visiting for 7 years? Who receives white lilies from a man who has never once brought me flowers? Her hands trembled. She should leave. She should return to Seoul, to her flower boutique, to the quiet life she had built from the ashes of a marriage that existed only on paper. But her feet moved forward. One step. Two. The door to room 147 loomed before her. She pressed her palm against the wood. Cool. Thought. Final. Do you really want to know? The voice in her head sounded like her mother's, warm, Nigerian, heavy with ancestral wisdom. Some truths heal. Others destroy. Make sure you're ready for both. Zara closed her eyes. She wasn't ready. But she was done waiting. Her fingers found the handle. She pushed. And the door swung open. The suite was bathed in candlelight. Dozens of white candles flickered across every surface. Tables, shelves, the windowsill overlooking the sea. White lilies filled crystal vases, their fragrance thick and haunting. And in the center of the room, Ji-won knelt before a small altar. A photograph rested on the silk-draped table. A woman's face. Beautiful. Korean. Young. Dead. Zara's heart stopped. This wasn't an affair. This was a memorial. Ji-won's tattooed hands were pressed together in prayer. His broad shoulders trembled with an emotion she had never seen him display. Grief. Pure, devastating grief. You came. His voice, low, rough, broken, shattered the silence. Zara froze. He hadn't turned around. But he knew. Of course he knew. Kang Ji-won always knew. 7 years, he continued, still facing the altar. I wondered when you would finally follow me. Zara's voice cracked. Who is she? Silence. The candles flickered. The sea roared beyond the windows. Ji-won rose slowly, his massive frame unfolding with dangerous grace. When he turned, the dragon scales along his neck caught the candlelight, creating shadows that danced across his sharp features. His eyes, those cold, piercing eyes that had once looked at her with something resembling love, now held only exhaustion. And pain. Endless, bottomless pain. Her name was Kim Soo-min, he said quietly. And she is the reason I married you. 3 days earlier, Zara's flower boutique had been filled with the scent of roses. Seoul in November meant early snow, crowded streets, and lovers seeking warmth in each other's arms. Zara's garden sat on a quiet street in Gangnam, a hidden gem known only to the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers hung from exposed brick ceilings. Rare orchids shipped from Nigeria lined the walls. Every arrangement was a work of art. And every petal Zara touched reminded her of the life she had lost. You're doing it again. Chinedu Adebayo leaned against the counter, his warm brown eyes studying her with concern. Zara didn't look up from the bouquet she was arranging. Doing what? Thinking about him. Her hands stilled. Chinedu had known her since childhood. Lagos summers spent playing in her grandmother's garden, university years in London, and finally Seoul, where he had followed her 3 years ago. He never said why. Zara knew. He always knew. I'm not thinking about him, she lied. Chinedu moved closer. His cologne, sandalwood and citrus, wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. November 14th is in 3 days. The words hit her like a slap. She set down the roses. I know. Are you going to let him disappear again? Zara finally met his gaze. What am I supposed to do, Chinedu? Follow him. Yes. The word hung between them. You've spent 7 years wondering, Chinedu continued, his voice gentle but firm. 7 years building a life around questions you're afraid to answer. You deserve the truth, Zara. Even if it breaks you. She looked away. Outside, snow began to fall. And if the truth is another woman? Chinedu's jaw tightened. Then you'll finally be free. Free. The word tasted like ash. Because freedom meant letting go. And despite everything, despite the silence, the distance, the cold formality of a marriage that existed only in legal documents, Zara had never been able to let go of Kang Ji-won. He was the dragon who had chosen her. And she was still burning in his fire. That night, Zara sat alone in her apartment overlooking the Han River. The divorce papers lay untouched on her desk. She had drafted them 6 months ago. She had never signed them. Why? The question haunted her as she stared at the city lights reflected on the water. She remembered the first time she saw Ji-won, a charity gala in Lagos 5 years before their marriage. She had been 23, fresh from completing her business degree, helping her father manage his import company. Ji-won had entered the room like a shadow given form. Silent. Terrifying. His Korean entourage flanked him like soldiers. His black suit probably cost more than her father's car. The dragon scales visible along his neck marked him as something dangerous. Something forbidden. But when his eyes found hers across the crowded room, everything stopped. He didn't smile. He didn't approach. He simply looked at her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and consumed. 3 months later he returned to Lagos. For her. Their courtship was a whirlwind of private jets, whispered conversations and moments of unexpected tenderness. He brought her mother flowers, white lilies she remembered now, and won her father's approval with a single conversation that lasted 4 hours. When Ji-won proposed, he didn't kneel. He stood before her in her grandmother's garden, the Nigerian sun setting behind him, and said simply, I don't know how to love gently. I only know how to love completely. If you accept me, I will spend my life protecting you from everything, including myself. She should have heard the warning. Instead she heard the promise. And she said yes. The first year was beautiful. Ji-won was everything she had never expected. Patient with her adjustment to Seoul, proud of her accomplishments, protective in ways that made her feel cherished rather than caged. He rarely spoke, but his silence held warmth. He touched her like she was precious. He watched her with eyes that softened only for her. But then came their first anniversary. And the first trip to Jeju. Business, he said. She believed him. The second year she noticed. Business again? His face showed nothing. Yes. The third year she asked more directly. Why Jeju? Why November 14th? Why do you always come back looking like you've been to a funeral? Jiwon's tattooed hands, tiger claws wrapped around his wrists, had clenched at his sides. Some questions have answers you're not ready to hear. Try me. For a moment, just a moment, something cracked behind his eyes. Then it sealed shut. No. That was when the distance began. Slowly at first. Then completely. By their fourth year they slept in separate rooms. By their fifth they barely spoke. By their sixth, Zara opened her flower boutique and began building a life that didn't include him. By their seventh, she decided to follow him. Room 147 felt smaller now. Smaller with Zara standing at the threshold. Smaller with the truth pressing against the walls. The reason you married me, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. What does that mean? Jiwon remained motionless before the altar. The photograph of Kim Soo-min watched them both with frozen eyes. Close the door, he said. Zara hesitated. Please. The word, so rare from his lips, made her comply. The door clicked shut. The candles wavered. And Jiwon began to speak. Soo-min was my sister. The words fell like stones into still water. Zara's breath caught. Your sister. Half-sister. Jiwon's voice was rough, rusty, as if the words had been locked away for too long. My father's daughter from an affair. She was kept hidden her entire life. Raised in the countryside, away from the family, away from the empire, away from everything that could hurt her. He moved to the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the winter sea. I discovered her existence when I was 22. She was 17. Brilliant. Kind. Everything I wasn't. The dragon on his back seemed to shift beneath his shirt as he breathed. I visited her in secret for years. Protected her. Provided for her. She was studying medicine, wanted to be a surgeon, save lives. A bitter laugh escaped him. She didn't know what I was. I never told her. Zara's heart twisted. What happened to her? Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. My enemies happened. Jiwon turned slowly. In the candlelight, his face looked carved from stone, beautiful and terrible and ancient with grief. 8 years ago my organization was at war. Rival families, territory disputes, the usual bloodshed. I thought I had kept Soo-min safe. Hidden. Protected. His tattooed hands curled into fists. I was wrong. Jiwon. They found her. His voice cracked. They took her to send me a message. By the time I reached her. He stopped. Zara saw it then, the tremble in his shoulders. The way his jaw worked against emotion too massive to contain. She died in my arms, he whispered. In this room. November 14th. 8 years ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Zara felt tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't remember when she had started crying. This resort was her favorite place, Jiwon continued. She came here every year for her birthday. Room 147 was always hers. After she died. He gestured to the altar. I come here to honor her. To remember. To carry the weight of failing the one person who loved me purely. Zara's voice broke. Why didn't you tell me? Jiwon's eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, finally met hers. And for the first time in 7 years she saw the man beneath the mask. Because you would have tried to share my pain, he said quietly. And I couldn't let you. This grief was mine to carry. Alone. The drive back to Seoul was silent. Zara sat in the passenger seat of Jiwon's black Mercedes, watching the winter landscape blur past the windows. Snow-covered mountains gave way to highways, then city lights. 3 hours of silence. But different from the silence she had known before. This silence was heavy with revelation. With questions still unasked. With pain still unexplored. You said Soo-min was the reason you married me. She finally spoke as they entered the city. Jiwon's tattooed fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Yes. Explain. He didn't look at her. Before she died, Soo-min made me promise something. What? A long pause. She knew what I was. What I did. The blood on my hands. His voice was barely audible. She begged me to find something worth living for. Someone who could bring light into the darkness I created. The city lights reflected in his eyes. 6 months after her death, I came to Lagos for business. I wasn't looking for anything except distraction from my guilt. He pulled the car to a stop outside Zara's apartment building. Neither of them moved. Then I saw you, he said quietly. Standing in that crowded room wearing your mother's jewelry, laughing at something your father said. And I thought. He finally turned to face her. I thought, she looks like she could save someone like me. Zara's heart cracked. I didn't want to be your project, she whispered. You weren't. Jiwon's voice hardened. You were never that. But I couldn't explain why I pursued you. Couldn't explain the desperation behind my proposal. Couldn't explain why I needed you without telling you about Sumin. So you said nothing. Yes. And when the distance started, I was protecting you. His jaw tightened. The men who killed Sumin were never fully eliminated. Every November they resurface. Every November I receive threats. And every November I leave to ensure they can never trace my movements back to you. Zara stared at him. You've been protecting me? Always. By pushing me away? By keeping you alive? The words hung between them, weighted with love, with pain, with 7 years of misunderstanding. I thought you had a mistress, Zara admitted, her voice breaking. I thought you loved someone else. Jiwon closed his eyes. When he opened them, they glistened in the city lights. There has never been anyone else. There will never be anyone else. His tattooed hand reached across the console, hovering near her face without touching. You are the only light I have left. Zara felt her resolve crumbling. All the walls she had built. All the anger she had nurtured. All the distance she had created to protect her heart. It was dissolving. Why didn't you fight for me? She whispered. When I pulled away, when I stopped sleeping in our bed, when I opened the boutique and built a life without you, why did you let me go? Jiwon's face contorted with pain. Because I thought you deserved better. Because I thought you were finally escaping the monster I was. Because. His voice cracked. Because I loved you too much to keep you trapped in my darkness. Zara reached for the door handle. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process the magnitude of what she had just learned. I need time, she managed. Take all the time you need. She opened the door, stepped into the cold night air. Then paused. The men who killed Sumin, she said, not turning around. Are they still a threat? Silence. Answer me. Yes. The word was final. Absolute. Terrifying. Zara walked into her building without looking back. But she felt his eyes on her until she disappeared from view. And she knew, with devastating certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. The following morning, Zara stood behind the counter of her boutique, hands buried in soil. Gardening had always calmed her. The feel of earth beneath her fingers. The quiet miracle of growth. The reminder that beautiful things could emerge from darkness. Today nothing helped. She had slept maybe 2 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jiwon kneeling before that altar. Saw the grief carved into his features. Saw the ghost of a sister she never knew existed. You look terrible. Chinidu appeared at the door carrying coffee. Zara didn't smile. Thank you for that observation. He set the cup before her. You went. It wasn't a question. I went. And. She met his eyes. Warm brown. Familiar. Safe. Everything Jiwon wasn't. There's no other woman, she said quietly. There never was. Chinida's expression flickered. Disappointment? Relief? Before settling into careful neutrality. Then what was it? Zara told him everything. Kimin. The murder. The annual pilgrimage. The protection. The love Jiwon had been carrying in silence for 7 years. When she finished, Chinidu was quiet for a long moment. That doesn't change what he did to you, he finally said. The distance. The coldness. The years of wondering. I know. You deserve someone who communicates. Someone who includes you in their pain instead of shutting you out. I know. Chinidu moved closer. You deserve someone who would never make you feel invisible. His hand brushed hers. Warm. Still. Present. Someone like me, he said softly. Zara looked up at him. She saw everything in his eyes. Years of friendship, of quiet devotion, of love carefully hidden but always present. He should feel something. He should want this. But all she saw was Jiwon's face, illuminated by candlelight, finally breaking after 7 years of silence. Chinidu. The door chimed. Both of them turned. And Zara's heart stopped. Kang Ji-won stood in the entrance of her boutique. His black coat was dusted with snow. His tattooed hands hung at his sides. And his eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, were fixed on Chinidu's hands still touching hers. The temperature in the room dropped. Then, Zara breathed. He didn't respond. Didn't move. But something shifted behind his eyes. Something dark. Something possessive. Something terrifying. Chinidu straightened, his jaw tightening. You must be the husband. I am. 2 words. Flat. Final. Deadly. Interesting, Chinidu continued, his voice hardening. She talks about you like you're a ghost. Now I see why. Chinidu, Zara warned. But Ji-won moved forward. Slow. Deliberate. The dragon scales along his neck seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. You've been taking care of my wife while I've been away. It wasn't a question. Someone had to, Chinidu replied. The air crackled. Zara stepped between them. Stop. Both of you. Ji-won's gaze dropped to her. The darkness in his eyes softened, just slightly, but the tension remained. I came to inform you, he said, his voice controlled. The men who killed Sumin have resurfaced. More aggressively than before. Zara's blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means you're in danger. Why would I be in danger? Ji-won's jaw clenched. Because they've discovered what you mean to me. That night, Zara refused to leave her boutique. Refused Ji-won's offer of protection. Refused his men stationed outside her building. Refused everything he represented. Because accepting his protection meant accepting him back into her life. And she wasn't ready. Not yet. You're being stubborn, Ji-won said, standing in her apartment doorway. I'm being cautious. Against enemies who have killed before? Zara turned to face him. He filled the door frame. Massive, silent, dangerous. The tiger claws tattooed around his wrists caught the lamplight. I've survived 7 years without your protection, she said quietly. I'll survive this. You survived because I was protecting you from the shadows. Eliminating threats before they reached you. Ensuring your safety without your knowledge. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. You've been watching me? Always. That's necessary. She shook her head. It's controlling. Ji-won moved forward. Slowly. Deliberately. Until he stood close enough that she could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker. You can call it whatever you want, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. But I will not apologize for keeping you alive. His tattooed hand rose. Hovered near her cheek. I've made many mistakes. Pushed you away when I should have held you close. Chosen silence when I should have spoken. But protecting you. His fingers brushed her skin, the faintest touch. That I will never regret. Zara's breath caught. She should step back. Should maintain the distance she had fought so hard to create. But her body wouldn't move. Her heart wouldn't listen. 7 years of longing. 7 years of questions. 7 years of loving a man who felt like a stranger. All of it crashed over her in a single moment. I don't know how to trust you again, she whispered. Ji-won's eyes searched hers. Then let me show you. How? By telling you everything. No more secrets. No more silence. Ask me anything and I will answer. Zara hesitated. Then asked the question that had haunted her for years. The men you work with. The whispers about your organization. What exactly are you? Ji-won didn't flinch. I am the head of the largest criminal syndicate in Asia. We control shipping routes, protection networks, and industries both legal and illegal. I have ordered deaths. I have blood on my hands that will never wash clean. The honesty was brutal, devastating, and somehow freeing. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. His voice was quiet. And because you deserve the truth even if it destroys whatever chance I had of winning you back. Zara felt tears threatening. Does Chinidu know? Ji-won's expression flickered. No. He's a good man. I'm aware. He's been there for me when you weren't. A muscle jumped in Ji-won's jaw. I'm aware of that too. Does it bother you? Silence. Long. Heavy. Then. Yes. The admission was raw. Unguarded. Jealousy isn't an emotion I experience often, Ji-won continued. But watching another man stand where I should have been standing, It awakens something dangerous in me. His hand fell from her cheek. He stepped back. Get some rest. My men will be outside. Tomorrow I'll explain everything, the threats, the plan, the future. He moved toward the door. Then paused. Zara. Yes. His back was to her. The dragon beneath his coat seemed to breathe with every rise and fall of his shoulders. I've spent 7 years loving you in silence. Watching you from a distance. Protecting you from dangers you never knew existed. He turned his head slightly. But I'm done being a ghost in your life. I'm going to fight for you now. Properly. And I don't intend to lose. The door closed behind him. Zara sank onto her couch. Her heart was racing. Her mind was spinning. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger, beneath the hurt, beneath the fear, hope was beginning to bloom. The next 3 days were a blur of revelations. Ji-won kept his promise. Every question answered. Every secret revealed. He told her about his father, a man who built an empire through blood and betrayal. About his mother, a woman who loved too deeply and died too young. About the code he had created for his organization. One that prohibited harm to innocents, that demanded loyalty above profit, that sought to bring order to chaos rather than create more destruction. We're not heroes, he admitted one evening, standing in her boutique after hours. But we're not monsters either. At least not anymore. Zara listened, processed, struggled to reconcile the man before her with the stories he told. The men who killed Sumin, she finally asked. Who are they? Ji-won's expression hardened. The Viper Syndicate. A rival organization based in Hong Kong. They've been trying to eliminate me for 2 decades. Why now? Because I'm weak. Zara blinked. You. A ghost of a smile crossed his features. Bitter, self-mocking. My enemies aren't fools. They've watched me for years. They know about the distance between us. Know about your boutique, your independence, your life apart from mine. He moved to the window looking out at the Seoul streets. They believe our marriage is over. That you're no longer under my protection. That harming you would destroy me without risking retaliation. Fear crept up Zara's spine. And would it? Ji-won turned. In the dim light, his tattooed hands curled into fists. If anything happened to you, he said quietly, I would burn the world. The words weren't romantic. They were a promise. A threat. A declaration of war against anyone who dared touch what he considered his. That's terrifying, Zara whispered. Yes. And somehow, reassuring. Ji-won's eyes softened. Is it? She looked away. I don't know what to feel anymore. Then don't decide. Not yet. He moved closer. Let me protect you. Let me prove myself. And when this threat is eliminated, then you can choose. Choose what? His voice dropped. Whether to stay, or let me go forever. The attack came on the 4th night. Zara was closing the boutique when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then darkness. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Hello. Silence. She reached for her phone. A hand clamped over her mouth. Don't scream. The voice was male. Cring. Calm in a way that made her blood freeze. We've been watching you, Mrs. Kong. The Black Dragon's wife. The weakness he tries to hide. Zara struggled, but the arm around her waist was iron. Here's what's going to happen, the voice continued. You're going to come with us. Quietly. And if you're lucky, your husband will trade his empire for your life. Tears streamed down her face. She thought of Ji-won. Of his warnings. Of his protection she had refused. I should have listened. I should have. The boutique door exploded inward. Glass shattered. Bodies moved. And suddenly, one was there. He moved like smoke made lethal. 3 men fell before Zara could process what was happening. The man holding her released his grip, only to receive Ji-won's tattooed fist across his jaw. Bones crunched. Bodies dropped. And then it was over. Ji-won stood in the center of the destroyed boutique, chest heaving, blood dripping from his knuckles. The dragon scales along his neck seemed to pulse with fury. His eyes found Zara. Are you hurt? She shook her head, trembling. He crossed to her in 3 strides. His hands, those tattooed, blood-stained hands, cupped her face with impossible gentleness. I have you, he breathed. I have you. Zara broke. 7 years of walls. 7 years of distance. 7 years of protecting her heart. All of it crumbled as she collapsed into his chest and sobbed. Ji-won held her. Just held her. His cheek pressed against her hair. His arms wrapped around her like armor. His heart beating steady and strong against her ear. "I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs. "I'm sorry I didn't listen. Shoo. I should have let you protect me. You're safe now. I was so scared." Ji-won pulled back. His thumbs wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Look at me." She did. His eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, were blazing. Not with anger. With something far more devastating. "I will never let anyone hurt you," he said, each word a vow. "Not while I breathe. Not while my heart still beats. You're mine, Zara. Mine to protect. Mine to cherish. Mine." The possessiveness should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. The following week was chaos. Ji-won moved Zara into his penthouse, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Han River. Armed guards patrolled every entrance. Security systems monitored every movement. And Ji-won himself barely left her side. "You don't have to watch me sleep," Zara said one night, finding him in the chair beside her bed. "I'm not watching you sleep." His voice was low. "I'm ensuring you wake." She sat up, studying him in the darkness. He looked exhausted. Shadows beneath his eyes. Tension in every line of his body. The Korean calligraphy on his collarbone, "Strength endures in silence," seemed to mock him. "When was the last time you slept?" "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." Ji-won closed his eyes. "I'll sleep when the threat is eliminated." Zara moved to the edge of the bed. "Come here." He opened his eyes. "What?" She pulled back the covers. "Come here." They lay side by side in the darkness. Not touching. Not speaking. Just present. After a long moment, Ji-won spoke. "I dream about it. The night Sumin died." Zara stayed quiet. "I held her while she bled out. Felt her life drain away. Heard her last words." "What did she say?" His voice cracked. "Find your light, brother. Promise me." Tears slipped down Zara's temples. "And you found me." "Yes. But you never told me. Because telling you meant explaining the darkness. And I wanted—" He paused. "I wanted you to see only the light." Zara reached across the space between them. Her fingers found his. Intertwined. Held. "I want to see all of you," she whispered. "The light in the dark. The protector and the monster. The man who kneels before his sister's altar and the one who destroys anyone who threatens what he loves." Ji-won turned his head. In the darkness, his eyes glistened. "You might not like what you see. Let me decide that." Silence. Long. Waited. Then. "Okay." The intel came 3 days later. Ji-won's network had traced the attack back to its source. Chin Wei-lin, the new head of the Viper Syndicate. Younger than his predecessors. More ruthless. Obsessed with destroying the Kong Empire. "He's planning something larger," Ji-won explained to his lieutenants, Zara present for the first time. The boutique attack was a test. A probe. "What's the target?" one of the men asked. Ji-won's jaw tightened. "The Kong Foundation Gala. 2 weeks from now. 500 guests, including government officials, international businessmen, and..." His eyes found Zara. "My wife." The room fell silent. "We should cancel," another lieutenant suggested. "No." Ji-won's voice was ice. "Canceling shows weakness. And weakness invites attack." "Then what's the plan?" Ji-won turned to the wall of screens displaying schematics, security footage and threat assessments. "We turn the gala into a trap. We let Chin Wei-lin believe he's launching a surprise attack. And then..." His tattooed fingers traced a path across the screen. "We eliminate him. Permanently." Later, alone in the penthouse, Zara confronted him. "You're using yourself as bait." Ji-won didn't deny it. "I'm ending this." "By potentially getting killed?" "By protecting you." Zara's frustration boiled over. "What good is your protection if you're dead? What happens to me then?" Ji-won turned. The dragon visible beneath his partially unbuttoned shirt seemed to breathe with his exhale. "If I die protecting you," he said quietly, "then I die having fulfilled my only purpose." "That's not..." "Zara." He moved closer. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I have lived 40 years on this earth. Built empires. Destroyed enemies. Accumulated more power than most men dream of. His hand rose, cupping her cheek. But the only thing I have ever truly wanted was standing in front of me in Lagos, wearing her mother's jewelry, laughing at something her father said. Tears threatened again. I'm not worth dying for. You're worth everything. His forehead pressed against hers. Let me do this. Let me end the threat. And then... His voice broke. Then maybe I can finally give you the husband you deserve. The gala was in 14 days. 14 days until everything changed. 14 days until either Ji-won eliminated his enemies, or they eliminated him. Zara stood at the penthouse window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. Behind her, Ji-won prepared for war. Plans were finalized. Weapons checked. Loyalties tested. And somewhere in the shadows of Hong Kong, Chin Wei-lin smiled. Because he had discovered something even Ji-won didn't know. Something that would shatter everything. A secret buried so deep that not even the Black Dragon of Seoul had uncovered it. A secret about room 147. About Kim Soo-min. About the night she truly died. And when that secret emerged, when Zara learned the whole truth, she would have to choose. Between the man who had loved her in silence for 7 years. And the devastation of understanding why. The next chapter of this story contains revelations that will change everything. The truth behind Soo-min's death. The real reason Ji-won married Zara. And a betrayal so devastating it threatens to destroy them both. Because some secrets don't just hurt. They annihilate. 11 days before the gala. Seoul was drowning in November rain. It came sideways, slashing against the penthouse windows like shattered glass, turning the city below into a watercolor of neon and shadow. Zara hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ji-won's face in the candlelight of room 147. Saw the grief, the love, the cracks in the armor he had worn for so long it had become his skin. She padded barefoot into the kitchen at 3 in the morning, and found Chinidu sitting at the counter. How did you get in here? She asked, startled. He held up a key card. Your husband's men let me through. Apparently, I'm on some kind of approved list now. Zara frowned. Ji-won approved you? Surprising, right? The dragon letting a potential rival into his lair. Chinidu's smile didn't reach his eyes. Unless he's doing it to watch me more closely. Zara sat beside him. Rain hammered the windows. Why are you here, Chinidu? He turned to her. The warmth in his brown eyes, that familiar Lagos warmth, sunlight and ochre earth, was shadowed by something heavier tonight. I need to tell you something. Her stomach tightened. About what? About your husband. Chinidu. Listen to me. His hand found hers on the counter. Before you choose him, before you let him back in, there's something you need to know. Zara's heart began to race. What are you talking about? Chinidu reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Thick, worn, sealed with tape that had been cut and resealed multiple times. 3 months ago, I started investigating Kang Ji-won. He held up a hand when she started to protest. Not because I'm jealous. Not because I want him gone. Because I care about you and something about his story never added up. He pushed the envelope across the counter. Open it. Zara stared at the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she unsealed it. Inside were photographs, documents, medical records, and a police report from 8 years ago. The police report was written in Korean, but someone, Chinidu presumably, had attached translated excerpts. Zara read them twice. Then a third time. Her blood turned to ice. This says, the official cause of death for Kim Soo-min was cardiac arrest. Yes. Not murder. No. Zara looked up. One told me she was killed. That his enemies took her. That she died in his arms. Chinida's expression was grim. Keep reading. She turned the page. A medical report from Jeju National Hospital. Date, November 14th. Patient, Kim Soo-min. Diagnosis, congenital heart defect. Long-term deterioration. Cause of death, sudden cardiac failure. Location of death, Azure Cliff Resort. Room 147. No external injuries. No evidence of foul play. No police investigation warranted. Zara's hands shook so violently the papers rattled. She wasn't murdered, she whispered. No, Chinidu confirmed quietly. She wasn't. Then why did he tell me she was? Silence. The rain answered for both of them, relentless, brutal, indifferent. There's more, Chinidu said. He pointed to the last document in the envelope. Financial record. A wire transfer dated 6 months after Suman's death. From the Kong Corporation to a private account in Lagos, Nigeria. Recipient. Okafor Import-Export Ltd. Amount, $12 million. Zara's father's company. The company that had been on the verge of bankruptcy before Ji-won appeared at that charity gala. Before he pursued her. Before he proposed. He paid your father, Chinidu said, each word measured. 6 months before you met. Your father's company was failing, Zara. And Kong Ji-won quietly injected $12 million into it. Then showed up in Lagos, charmed the family and married the daughter. Zara couldn't breathe. That doesn't necessarily mean. It means he chose you, Chinidu interrupted gently. Before he ever saw you across that room. Before the romantic story of eyes meeting across a crowded gala. He had already selected you. The room tilted. Why? I don't know, Chinidu admitted. But the man who married you is not the man you think he is. He didn't just lie about how his sister died. He rewrote the entire story to manipulate your sympathy. Zara stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against marble. I need to talk to him. Zara, wait. But she was already moving. Down the hallway. Past the guards who straightened at her approach. Toward the study where Ji-won spent his sleepless nights. She threw open the door. Ji-won was standing at the window, silhouetted against the storm. Shirtless. The massive dragon on his back was fully visible. Black ink in churning waves and peonies blooming in violence. The tiger on his chest snarled beneath cherry blossoms. Every tattoo told a story of power, of pain, of a life lived in shadows. He turned at the sound of the door. His eyes found the envelope in her hand. And something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Not anger. Recognition. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. Does it matter? Silence. Zara held up the police report. She wasn't murdered. Ji-won didn't move. Suman died of a heart condition. Not at the hands of your enemies. Not because someone kidnapped her. She died of natural causes in that hotel room. Her voice cracked. You lied to me. Ji-won's jaw tightened. The Korean calligraphy across his collarbone, strength endures in silence, rose and fell with his heavy breathing. Yes, he said. One word. No defense. No explanation. Just the raw, devastating admission. Zara felt the floor drop beneath her. She had expected him to deny it. To explain. To offer some justification that would make the lie digestible. Instead he simply stood there, massive, tattooed, bare, and accepted her fury like a man stepping into a storm he had created. Why? She demanded. Why tell me she was murdered? Why create enemies, threats, danger? Why build an entire fiction around her death? Because the truth was worse. Worse than murder? Yes. Zara threw the envelope onto his desk. Papers scattered. Then tell me. The real truth. All of it. Now. Ji-won closed his eyes. When he opened them, the mask was gone. Completely. For the first time since she had known him, there was nothing between her and the man behind the legend. And what she saw was a man drowning. Suman's heart condition was genetic, he began, his voice low. Inherited from my father. I have the same defect. Zara's breath caught. You. I was diagnosed at 25. The same year I found Suman. The same condition. The same prognosis. He moved to his desk and sat heavily. The doctors gave Suman 5 years. They gave me 10, maybe 15 with treatment. He looked up at her. I've had 13. The world tilted. Zara gripped the doorframe. You're dying. I'm managing a condition. But yes, the timeline is finite. How finite? Silence. Ji-won. How finite? 2 years. Maybe 3. Depending on treatment compliance. Zara's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, back against the wall, hands pressed to her mouth. Ji-won rose, crossed to her, knelt. His tattooed hands hovered over her shoulders without touching. This is why I lied, he said quietly. Suman died because her heart gave out. I will die because mine will do the same. And I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't tell you that I married you knowing I would leave you. Knowing I was giving you a husband with an expiration date. So I created enemies instead. Created threats. Gave you something to fight against, something external, because the real enemy was inside my chest. Tears streamed down Zara's face. The attacks. Real. My enemies are real. But they didn't kill Sumin. The men at my boutique. The Viper Syndicate is genuine. Chin Weilin is a genuine threat. I amplified the danger to justify my behavior. The distance, the secrecy, the protection details. You used real enemies to cover a fake story? I used real enemies to avoid telling you the truth. Zara stared at him through tears. And the money. My father's company. Jiwon's expression didn't waver. Your father's company was failing. He had 3 months before bankruptcy. I learned this through business channels, before I ever came to Lagos. So you bought me. The words were a knife. Jiwon flinched. Actually flinched. No. You paid my father $12 million and then showed up to court his daughter. I paid your father because Sumin asked me to. Zara went still. What? Jiwon's tattooed hands finally settled on her shoulders. His grip was gentle but desperate. Before Sumin died, she was studying at a university in London. Her roommate was a Nigerian girl, brilliant, kind, from a family that had fallen on hard times. Zara's heart hammered. That girl's name was Adiz Okafor. The room spun. My cousin. Adiz. Yes. They were close friends. Sisters almost. When Sumin learned about your family's financial troubles, she begged me to help. Anonymously. Quietly. Without expectation of return. Jiwon's eyes bore into hers. I sent the money to honor my sister's wish. Not to purchase a bride. I didn't even know you existed until months later, when I came to Lagos and your father invited me to that gala. He paused. When I saw you across that room, it wasn't orchestrated. It wasn't planned. It was the first moment in my life where something meant. Zara was trembling. And the promise? Sumin's last words, find your light? Real. Everything about my love for Sumin is real. Everything about my love for you is real. The only lie was how she died. He released her shoulders. Sat back. Let the distance grow between them. I understand if you can't forgive me, he said. I've given you every reason to leave. Hidden. Manipulated circumstances to keep you close while pushing you away. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I need you to know, every moment I spent loving you was genuine. Every silent night I sat beside your door. Every threat I eliminated without your knowledge. Every November 14th I knelt before her altar and begged her forgiveness for failing you both. He rose. Crossed to the window. Stood with his back to her, the dragon tattoo catching the lightning that split the sky. Now you have the truth. All of it. The real monster isn't some syndicate or rival boss. He pressed his palm flat against the glass. The real monster's time. And I am running out. Zara didn't remember standing. Didn't remember crossing the room. But suddenly she was behind him, her reflection overlapping with his in the rain-streaked glass. Turn around. He didn't move. G1. Turn around. Slowly he obeyed. His eyes were red. The great Kong Ji-won, the black dragon of Seoul, the man who commanded an empire through silence and terror, had been crying. Zara's hand rose to his chest. Her palm pressed flat against the tiger tattoo directly over his heart. He felt it beating. Strong. Irregular. Fighting. How long have you known? She asked. 13 years. And the treatments? Experimental. Ongoing. They've extended the timeline, but... He covered her hand with his. There's a surgical option. Developed in Switzerland. A specialized procedure that could repair the defect permanently. Hope flickered. Then why haven't you? The survival rate is 40%. The hope died. 40%. I've been managing with medication because the odds of surviving the surgery are 40%, she repeated, her voice hollow. Yes. She pulled her hand back. Paste. Stopped. Paste again. So your choices are, die slowly over 2 to 3 years or gamble on a surgery that has a 60% chance of killing you immediately? Essentially. And you've known this for 13 years. Yes. And you chose to spend those years pushing away the one person who could have helped you through it. Ji-won's silence was confirmation enough. Zara exploded. You stubborn, arrogant, impossible man. Her voice shattered the quiet of the penthouse. Guards shifted outside the door. Rain lashed the windows. 7 years. 7 years I thought you didn't love me. 7 years I thought there was another woman, another life, another reason you kept leaving. She was sobbing now, ugly, raw, broken sobs that tore from her chest like something being ripped free. And the whole time you were dying? You were watching me from the shadows, protecting me from fake threats, letting me build a life without you so I wouldn't be destroyed when you finally... She couldn't finish. Ji-won crossed to her. His arms wrapped around her, massive, inked, trembling. I'm sorry, he breathed into her hair. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She beat her fists against his chest, then gripped his shoulders, then collapsed into him. They sank to the floor together. The black dragon of soul and the Nigerian woman who had bloomed in his shadow. Tangled. Broken. Finally honest. You don't get to die, she whispered fiercely. Do you hear me? You don't get to die. Zara. Get the surgery. The odds. I don't care about the odds. She pulled back, gripping his face. I spent 7 years without you while you were alive. I will not spend the rest of my life without you because you were too afraid to fight. His eyes searched hers. And if I don't survive? Then I will have loved a man who was brave enough to try. Something shifted in his expression. Something ancient and heavy and tired finally. Released. Okay, he whispered. Okay. I'll get the surgery. After the gala. After Chin Wei-lin is eliminated. After you're safe. Promise me. His tattooed hand cupped her cheek. I promise. Outside the storm raged. Inside room 147 of their hearts, a door finally opened. 9 days before the gala. Zara moved back into the master bedroom. Not the guest suite. Not the separate room she had occupied for years. The master bedroom. Ji-won noticed. Said nothing. But that night she found white lilies on her nightstand. Fresh. Fragrant. With a small card in his handwriting. Every lily I ever bought was for you. Even the ones I laid at her altar. Because you are the promise I made to her. J. Zara pressed the card to her chest and cried until she fell asleep. The next morning she went to her boutique. Chinidu was waiting. He stood when she entered, searching her face for damage, for tears, for the aftermath of whatever hurricane had swept through the penthouse. You went back to him, he said. It wasn't a question. I did. Despite everything I showed you? Because of everything you showed me. Zara set down her bag. Chinidu, you were right to investigate. Right to question. Right to protect me. But the truth isn't what we thought. She told him about the heart condition. About the surgery. About Sumin's real cause of death. About the money and Adiz and the connection that predated their marriage. When she finished, Chinidu was quiet for a long time. He's still a criminal, he finally said. Yes. He still lied to you for 7 years. Yes. And you're choosing him anyway. Zara met his eyes. I'm choosing the man who loved me enough to suffer in silence. Who carried the weight of his own mortality alone so I wouldn't have to share it. Who visited his dead sister every year and prayed that he was worthy of the promise he made to her. She reached for Chinidu's hand. You're a good man. The best man I know. And you deserve someone who chooses you first, not as a refuge from someone else. Pain flickered across his features. Then acceptance. Slow. Grudging. But real. If he hurts you again, then you'll be the first person I call. A sad smile. I'll hold you to that. He squeezed her hand. Then let go. And Zara understood that some loves are meant to be bridges, carrying you from one shore to the next, not destinations. Chinidu had been her bridge. Ji-won was her shore. The Kong Foundation Gala was held in the Grand Hyatt Seoul. 500 guests filled the ballroom. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, diplomats. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across black marble floors. A string quartet played Debussy. And Kang Ji-won stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching his wife descend. Zara wore emerald green. A custom gown that swept the floor like liquid night. Gold jewelry inherited from her grandmother gleamed at her throat and wrists. Nigerian craftsmanship that had survived 4 generations. Her hair was pulled back, exposing the elegant line of her neck. She was magnificent, and every eye in the room confirmed it. But only one pair of eyes mattered. Ji-won waited at the bottom of the stairs. Black suit, black shirt, the dragon scales visible along his neck. The tiger claws inked around his wrists, catching the light as he extended his hand. You look. He stopped, swallowed, started again. I don't have words. Zara took his hand. Then don't use them. They entered the ballroom together. For the first time in 7 years. Together. The evening was a masterwork of controlled chaos. Ji-won played his role flawlessly, charming diplomats, intimidating rivals, commanding the room with nothing more than his presence and his silence. But beneath the surface, his organization operated like a military unit. 30 of his men were positioned throughout the hotel. Exit routes were mapped. Weapons were concealed. And somewhere in the building, Chin Wei-lin's operatives were doing the same. One knew they were here. He had designed the gala to ensure it. Mr. Kong. The voice came from behind him. Ji-won turned slowly. A man stood at the edge of the crowd. Chinese. Mid-40s. Expensive suit. Cold smile. Chin Wei-lin, Ji-won said. In the flesh. Chin tilted his head. Beautiful event. Beautiful wife. It would be a shame if something disrupted the evening. Ji-won's tattooed fingers tightened around his whiskey glass. Is that a threat? Consider it an observation. Chen's eyes drifted across the room to where Zara stood, talking with a group of diplomats' wives. She's lovely. I can see why you've gone to such lengths to protect her. Ji-won's voice dropped to a frequency that made nearby guests unconsciously step away. If your eyes rest on her for one more second, I will remove them from your skull. Chin laughed softly. Always so dramatic, Ji-won. Your father was the same. He sipped his champagne. I didn't come here to fight. I came to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate. On the contrary. Chin reached into his jacket and produced a small USB drive. This contains evidence of every illegal operation your organization has conducted over the past decade. Shipping routes. Protection payments. Eliminated rivals. He held it up between 2 fingers. Walk away from your empire. Transfer your assets to me. And I'll ensure this never reaches the authorities. Ji-won studied the drive. Then smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Chin Wei-lin had ever seen. You've made a critical miscalculation, Ji-won said quietly. Have I? You assumed I care about my empire. Chen's confidence wavered. Ji-won set down his whiskey. I built this empire to protect the people I love. If it becomes a liability to their safety. He leaned closer. I will burn it myself. The words weren't metaphorical. And Chin Wei-lin, for the first time in his criminal career, felt genuine fear. It happened at 10:47 p.m. The lights went out. 500 guests gasped in unison. Emergency lighting flickered, red then white then nothing. Screams. Movement. Chaos. Ji-won was already moving. His hand found Zara's in the darkness, tattooed fingers wrapping around hers with crushing precision. Stay close to me. Ji-won, what's happening? Stay close. His men materialized from the shadows like ghosts. Practiced. Silent. Southeast exit is compromised, one reported through an earpiece. Northwest is clear. Take the guests through the kitchen, Ji-won commanded. Northwest exit. Vehicles waiting on Seoul Road. And Chin Wei-lin? Ji-won's grip on Zara's hand tightened. He's mine. The evacuation was surgical. Within 8 minutes, 460 guests were safely removed through service corridors. But 40 remained trapped in the East Wing, where Chen's men had locked the doors and set explosives. He's insane, Ji-won muttered, studying the schematics on his lieutenant's tablet. He'll kill civilians. He doesn't care about civilians, the lieutenant replied. He cares about you. Ji-won looked at Zara. She stood beside him in the emergency stairwell, her emerald gown dusty, her grandmother's gold still gleaming at her throat. She was afraid, but she was not broken. I'm going in, Ji-won said. No, Zara grabbed his arm. 40 people are trapped. Chin wants me. If I go in, he'll focus on me. My team can extract the hostages through the service tunnels. And what about you? Ji-won cupped her face. His tattooed thumbs traced her cheekbones. Remember what you said? That you wanted a man brave enough to try? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't mean like this. I know. He pressed his forehead to hers. But this is who I am. The man who walks into the fire so the people he loves don't have to. He kissed her. Not gently. Not sweetly. He kissed her like it was the last time. Like 7 years of silence and longing and regret poured through that single point of contact. His tattooed hands cradled her face. Her fingers gripped his shirt. And in that stairwell, illuminated by emergency lights and the sound of distant chaos, they found each other again. When he pulled back, his eyes were clear, focused, resolved. If I don't come back. Don't say that. If I don't come back, the surgery won't matter. But know this, every day of the last 7 years I loved you. Every silent morning. Every cold night. Every November 14th. I loved you, Zara. Only you. Always you. He released her, turned, and walked toward the fire. The East Wing ballroom was a war zone. Overturned tables. Shattered glass. 40 terrified guests huddled against the far wall, guarded by 6 of Chen's armed men. And Chen Weilin himself stood on the stage, a detonator in his hand. Ah, he said when Jiwon entered through the main doors. The dragon arrives. Jiwon walked with the measured pace of a predator. Unarmed. Unhurried. His coat had been discarded. His black shirt, partially unbuttoned, revealed the fierce tiger on his chest, cherry blossoms cascading down his ribs. The dragon on his back moved with every step. You have what you want, Jiwon said calmly. Release the hostages. I want your empire. Then take it. Chin blinked. What? I'll sign over everything. Every company. Every asset. Every dollar. Release the hostages and it's yours. Chin studied him for a long moment. You'd give up a $12 billion empire? Without hesitation. Why? Jiwon's voice was quiet. Because empires are built from ambition. And I found something worth more. Chen's eyes narrowed. Then he laughed. Your wife. The Nigerian woman. You'd trade everything for her. I would trade the world. Chin pressed a button on his phone. 3 of his men escorted the hostages toward the service tunnels. Jiwon's hidden team intercepted them. Silently, efficiently, safely. But Chin kept the detonator. And 3 armed men. And the doors locked. Now, Chin said, descending from the stage. Let's discuss terms. There are no terms. Jiwon moved. It happened so fast that Chen's men barely registered the motion. The first guard dropped from a strike to the throat. The second crumpled from a devastating blow to the temple. The third raised his weapon. And Jiwon caught his wrist, twisted, disarmed. 3 seconds. 3 men down. Chin scrambled backward, detonator raised. One more step and I blow this building. Jiwon stopped. Studied him. Then said something that made Chen's blood freeze. That detonator was disabled 40 minutes ago. My demolitions expert intercepted the frequency while you were making your speech. Chen's thumb pressed the button. Nothing happened. Nothing. His face drained of color. Jiwon stepped forward. You came into my city. Threatened my wife. Endangered innocent people. Another step. You used my sister's memory, the investigation, the probing into her death, as leverage to destabilize me. You assumed my love was weakness. He stopped directly in front of Chen Weilin. The dragon scales on his neck caught the emergency lighting. His tattooed knuckles. Honor. Family. Power. Vengeance, curled at his sides. My love is the most dangerous thing about me. Jiwon's men swarmed the room. Chen Weilin was taken alive, bound, processed, delivered to authorities with enough evidence to ensure he never breathed free air again. The explosives were dismantled. The hostages were safe. The gala was over. And Jiwon walked out of the East Wing with blood on his tattooed knuckles and a promise kept. 3 days after the gala. Seoul recovered. The news cycle spun the event as a security incident. Details classified, investigation ongoing, no casualties. Jiwon's organization cleaned every trace. But the internal damage was deeper. Zara sat on the penthouse balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city heal. Jiwon found her there at sunset. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at her. You're staring, she said without turning. I'm admiring. She smiled faintly. He sat beside her. For a while neither spoke. The sky burned orange and gold above the Han River. I called the hospital in Switzerland, he said finally. Zara turned. The surgery is scheduled for January 15th. Her breath caught. That's 2 months away. They need time to prepare. And I need time too. He paused. To what? His tattooed hand found hers on the blanket. To give you the time you deserve. The honesty you deserve. The husband you deserve. Zara laced her fingers with his. Ink and warmth. Strength and vulnerability. Dragon and woman. You know, she said softly, in my grandmother's village there's a saying. The river that runs silent carries the deepest water. Ji-won looked at her. I spent 7 years thinking your silence meant emptiness. That you had nothing left to give me. But your silence was the deepest love I've ever known. Her thumb traced the tiger claw tattoo on his wrist. I don't need a perfect husband, Ji-won. I don't need a man without secrets or scars or blood on his hands. She met his eyes. I need the man who kneels before his sister's altar every November and prays for forgiveness. The man who dismantles empires for the people he loves. The man who has been protecting me from the shadows for 7 years because he thought he didn't deserve to stand in my light. Tears glistened in Ji-won's eyes. You deserve better. I deserve you. That night the penthouse was quiet. No guards at the bedroom door. No distance between them. Just 2 people finding their way back to each other after 7 years of wandering in the dark. Ji-won's tattooed hands trembled as they framed Zara's face. Her fingers traced the dragon scales along his neck. The tiger on his chest pressed against her palm. Are you sure? He whispered. She answered by pulling him closer. Their foreheads touched. Their breath mingled. And when their lips met, it wasn't like the kiss in the stairwell. This was slow. Deliberate. 7 years of longing poured into a single devastating moment of surrender. Ji-won lifted her gently, carrying her as though she were made of glass and starlight. The bedroom door closed behind them. The city lights painted shadows on the walls. And somewhere beyond the window the first snow of December began to fall. Fade to black. December 14th. 1 month after the gala. 1 month before the surgery. Ji-won and Zara drove to Jeju Island together. The Azure Cliff Resort looked different in daylight. Less haunting. Less lonely. The volcanic coastlines sparkled under a winter sun, and the pine forests whispered with ocean wind. They walked the corridor together. Side by side. His tattooed hand holding hers. Room 147 was unchanged. But this time there were 2 sets of white lilies. Ji-won knelt before the altar. Zara knelt beside him. Sumin, Ji-won said quietly, I want you to meet someone. Zara placed her lilies beside his. She's the one you told me to find, he continued. The light you promised existed. It took me too long to stop hiding from it. His voice wavered. I'm getting the surgery next month. I'm going to fight, the way you would have wanted me to. And whatever happens, I need you to know. He paused. Zara reached for his hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. I kept the promise. I found my light. And I'm never letting go. Later, standing at the window of room 147, Zara looked out at the sea. I want to come to Switzerland with you, she said. I know. I want to be in the room when you wake up. If I wake up. He turned to him. When you wake up. A ghost of a smile. Yes, ma'am. She punched his arm lightly. He caught her hand. Pulled her close. His arms wrapped around her. Massive, inked, alive. I'm afraid, he admitted into her hair. I know. I haven't been afraid of anything in 20 years. Fear means you have something worth living for. He tightened his hold. I have everything worth living for. January 15th. Zurich, Switzerland. The Hirslanden Clinic sat in the hills above Lake Zurich. White stone and glass, silent as a monastery. Zara sat in the waiting room for 11 hours. Chinidu called twice. Her mother called 3 times. Her father called once. A quiet conversation in Igbo that ended with him saying, Your husband is a warrior. Warriors don't fall easily. Ji-won's lieutenants maintained contact from Seoul. The organization held its breath. Hour 12. The surgeon emerged. Dr. Muller was 60, gray-haired, steady-handed. He looked at Zara. And smiled. The procedure was successful. Zara's knees buckled. A nurse caught her. He's stable, Dr. Muller continued. The repair is holding. His heart rhythm has normalized for the first time in 13 years. Tears flooded Zara's face. Can I see him? He's sedated. But yes. She followed the surgeon through sterile corridors. Into a private room. In there, Ji-won lay on the hospital bed. So, wired to monitors that beeped with steady, strong rhythms. His tattoos, the dragon, the tiger, the calligraphy, the tiger claws, seemed softened by the clinical light. But he was alive. His heart was beating. Really beating. For the first time in 13 years. Zara pulled a chair to his bedside. Took his tattooed hand in hers. And waited. He woke at dawn. The first thing he saw was Zara, asleep in the chair beside him, her hand still clutching his. Snowflakes drifted past the window. Lake Zurich shimmered below. Ji-won squeezed her fingers. She woke. Their eyes met. Hi, he whispered. She burst into tears. Hi. I'm here. I know. I promised. You did. He lifted their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles. I told you, he murmured against her skin. Warriors don't fall easily. Zara laughed through her tears. My father told you that? He called the operating room. He did not. He absolutely did. Threatened the surgeon in Igbo. Zara dissolved into laughter. Bright, full, alive. The sound filled the room. Filled the silence. Filled every empty space that 7 years of distance had carved between them. And Ji-won, the black dragon of soul, the man who spoke in silences and loved in shadows, smiled. Really smiled. For the first time in years. 3 months later. Spring in Seoul. Cherry blossoms painted the city in soft pink and white, drifting on warm winds that carried the scent of new beginnings. Ji-won stood at the altar of the Grand Shilla Hotel. But this was no business event. No gala. No power display. This was a wedding. Their wedding. 300 guests filled the ballroom. Korean and Nigerian, criminal and legitimate, family and chosen family. Zara's mother sat in the front row weeping with joy. Her father stood tall, ready to walk her down the aisle for the second time. Chinidu sat 3 rows back. Beside him, a Korean woman he had met at Zara's boutique 2 months earlier. Their hands were intertwined. When Zara had learned about it, she had smiled so wide her face ached. Bridges can become destinations after all, she thought. The music began. A blended arrangement. Traditional Korean instruments woven with Nigerian drums. A sound that shouldn't have worked. But did. Perfectly. Zara appeared at the top of the aisle. White gown. Her grandmother's gold jewelry. White lilies in her bouquet. She was radiant. And when Ji-won saw her, the black dragon of soul. The man who commanded empires through silence. The man whose tattooed body was a testament to power and pain and survival. He broke. Tears slid down his sharp cheekbones. His tattooed hands trembled at his sides. His lieutenants, hardened men who had killed without flinching, looked away, blinking rapidly. Zara reached the altar. Her father placed her hand in Ji-won's. Leaned close. Whispered something in Igbo. Ji-won replied. Igbo. The crowd gasped. Zara stared. When did you? I've been learning for 3 months. His accent was rough but earnest. Your father has been my teacher. Every morning. 6 a.m. Fresh tears spilled down her face. You impossible man. You're impossible man. The officiant spoke. But the words that mattered came from Ji-won. He turned to Zara. Took both her hands. And spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the room. 7 years ago I married you with secrets in my heart and fear in my bones. I told myself I was protecting you by hiding the truth. I told myself silence was love. I was wrong. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. Love is not silence. Love is this, standing before you broken and rebuilt, terrified and brave, with every scar and every sin laid bare. He paused. Swallowed. I protected the promise behind that door for 7 years. But I loved you every day. The room was silent. Absolutely silent. I cannot promise you perfection. I cannot promise you safety, though I will fight for it with every breath I have. I cannot promise you a life without shadows. His voice dropped. But I can promise you this. You will never be invisible again. You will never wonder if you are loved. You will never spend another November 14th alone. He raised her hands to his lips. From this day forward, no more secrets. No more silence. No more distance. His eyes, those piercing, devastating eyes, held hers. Just us. Zara's vows were simpler. My grandmother once told me that love is not a river. It's the stones at the bottom. Invisible. Permanent. Holding everything together even when the water runs dry. She touched his face. You are my stones, Juan. Even when I couldn't see you. Even when I thought you were gone. You were there, holding me together, holding us together, holding the promise you made to a girl who believed you deserved to be loved. She smiled through tears. Suman was right. You do deserve it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. The rings were exchanged. The vows were sealed. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss your bride," Jiwon pulled Zara into his arms with a tenderness that made the room ache. His tattooed hands cradled her face. Her fingers gripped his lapels. And they kissed. Not with the desperation of the stairwell. Not with the surrender of the penthouse. But with the quiet certainty of two people who had walked through fire and emerged holding hands. The crowd erupted. Korean and Nigerian cheers blended into a sound that shook the chandeliers. Zara's mother wailed with happiness. Her father stood with tears streaming into his beard. Chinidu clapped with genuine joy, his arm around the woman beside him. Jiwon held his wife like she was the only real thing in the world. Because she was. 1 year later. November 14th. Jeju Island. The Azure Cliff Resort was quiet. Snow dusted the pine trees. Waves whispered against volcanic rock. Zara and Jiwon walked the familiar corridor. Hand in hand. His tattooed fingers wrapped around hers. Her other hand rested on her belly. Round. 5 months along. Room 147 was filled with white lilies. But this time, no candles. No darkness. Sunlight streamed through the windows, setting the sea ablaze with gold. They knelt before the altar together. The photograph of Kim Suman watched them with frozen eyes that somehow seemed to smile. We're having a girl, Jiwon said quietly. We're naming her Suman. He paused. Suman Okafor Kong. Zara squeezed his hand. She'll know your story, Zara added softly. She'll know about the aunt who believed in light. Who loved fiercely. Who made her father promise to find joy. Jiwon pressed his free hand to Zara's belly. Beneath his palm the baby kicked. Strong. Alive. A heartbeat within a heartbeat. Thank you, he whispered to the photograph. For the promise. For the push. For the love that survived death and reached across years to pull him from the darkness. They left room 147 together. The door closed behind them. But this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like permission. To let go. To live. To love without the weight of secrets, without the shadow of silence. Without the prison of 7 years' worth of unanswered questions. Outside, the Jeju sun hung low over the water. Zara leaned against her husband's chest. His arms, massive, tattooed, alive, wrapped around her. The dragon on his back faced the sea. The tiger on his chest pressed against her shoulder. The calligraphy on his collarbone, strength endures in silence, caught the golden light. But strength didn't need silence anymore. Strength had found its voice. In a woman from Lagos who planted flowers in Seoul. In a promise made to a ghost in room 147. In the steady, strong, beating heart of a man who had finally learned that the bravest thing he could do was not to fight, but to stay. I protected the promise behind that door for 7 years. But I loved you every day. Kong Ji-won. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Every story we tell is a promise. That love endures, that truth heals. And that even the most broken among us deserve a second chance. Until next time.